Okay, hello YouTube. Today we're going to be talking about when we should and shouldn't exchange pieces. So if you like content like this and want to see more of it, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and click on your notification icon. So one obvious situation where we should avoid exchanging pieces is any time where we're actually expending more energy to make an exchange than we're getting out of it. So basically, take this situation where black plays bishop g4, now white plays d takes e5, and now black is kind of forced to play bishop takes f3 if he doesn't want to lose material. This is a problem because this bishop took two moves to make this exchange, but the queen replaced the knight, and therefore white has gained time. So like after d takes e5, we have bishop c4, and now white is up a huge amount of time. White has two pieces out and black has 0. So in general, whenever the bishop kind of makes contact with the knight like this, you want to wait to get prompted. You basically want to wait for white to play a move like h3 so that white is expending the same amount of energy with his pieces that you are expending with yours. So you're taking two moves to capture this knight, but you also want white to expend two moves in that exchange as well. You want white to expend the move knight f3 and h3 if you're going to expend the move bishop g4 and bishop f3. So another example of that would be the Queen's Gambit declined, which is a super popular opening. We would have knight c3, knight f6, bishop to g5, bishop e7, and then generally speaking, we're not going to be playing bishop takes f6 unprompted. This is something that's frowned on. You can see it's actually been played quite a few times. I have the Lee Chess player database open here. Bishop takes f6 has been played quite a few times. It's a mistake. But if you go to the Masters database, it's only been played 4 times. So you can see there's a big kind of disconnect between what Masters are willing to do and what amateurs are willing to do in terms of exchanging. Masters are always going to wait for that prompt because why would I not? Because if I wait just a couple of moves, e3, we'll have castle's kingside here, and then we'll have knight f3, h6. Now bishop takes f6 is a perfectly acceptable move if that's what I actually wanted to do with the position. So if we go back, what are some other examples of when we should exchange and when we shouldn't? So one example of an exchange that we want to make is, let's take a look at this position in the Scotch, like after d4, ed4, knight d4. Now in this case, exchanging this knight for this knight is something that white wants, but is something that black does not want. And again, we're going to see a huge disconnect between the Masters database and the Lee Chess database. If you look at all of the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 7 options here or whatever, none of them are the move knight takes d4. But if I look in the player database here of just random average players, that's right, the most popular move is knight takes d4. And it's absolutely terrible. Like if we look at the computer assessment, as soon as we play this move knight takes d4, right after the move queen d4, we have like major advantage white. The computer's getting close to a full pawn. So the question is why? Well, there is this issue of energy. You know, we're expending 2 moves to take a piece that has also expended 2 moves, but that piece that expended 2 moves is getting replaced by a piece. So that's an issue, is white hasn't lost any time. But it's very difficult for black to complete his development after this knight takes d4, queen takes d4, with this queen in the middle of the board and having no clear way to get rid of it. Like, we can try to counter the queen with our queen, we can play queen f6, but that's kind of awkward. The majority of masters that have ever played this have all tried this maneuver where they try to play knight e7 to c6. But again, it takes more energy to bring another knight to the c6 square than it took for white to just develop another piece. So if you go to the Masters database, people have tried this move, knight e7, knight c3, knight c6, and then queen e3, bishop b4, bishop d2, let's say castles, queenside d6, has just been a huge advantage for white. The computer's giving close to +2 pawns here for white. So basically, black doesn't want to make this exchange where white's pieces can then dominate the center of the board because black has run out of pieces to kind of kick white out of the middle. And this is a little counterintuitive because in general, when you have less space and you have less room to maneuver, you actually want to just make as many exchanges as possible to try to relieve that space disadvantage. But in this case, where you don't have great control of the middle, you don't want to exchange off a piece where you that you need to help control what little bit of the center that you have left. So generally speaking, black should play a move like knight f6, and then generally speaking, white has no problem playing this exchange himself. White has no problem playing knight c6, bc6, and then going for the middle from here, even though he expended more energy to make that exchange. He did 1, 2, 3 moves to exchange himself for a piece that had only moved one time. He's willing to do this because he knows that by making this exchange, he's going to gain a lot of dominance in the center of the board because that knight can no longer control those critical squares in the middle, and that's a critical thing for white trying to control that central area. So he's willing to make that exchange even though he's not gaining any particular amount of time. Okay, so another example of when we can make exchanges like this, or another example of exchanges that we might want to make or might not want to make, are the cases where we have obviously good pieces or obviously bad pieces. So like e4, e6, d4, d5. e5, we have a French defense. White's pawns are on dark squares, so he has a clearly bad bishop, and he also has a clearly good one. So another example of an exchange we don't want to make is we do not want to get rid of our good bishop. So again, if we go to the master's database, obviously nobody's playing bishop b5 check. Go to the player database, a bunch of people played it. We've got 353,000 games have played bishop b5 check, and then a bunch of those people have actually exchanged off their good bishop and just played the rest of the game with a disadvantage, because of course now their light squares are weak, they don't have any pawns that can defend them, and of course the computer just says this is slight edge black. That's generally a bad thing. You don't want to trade off your good bishop, especially for your opponent's bad bishop. This is known as the French bishop. It's completely blocked by pawns. It's a terrible piece. Black gets rid of his worst piece. White gets rid of arguably his best minor piece in exchange for black's worst minor piece. And so hence the shift in advantage from plus 0.3 for white to minus about a half a pawn for white after this exchange takes place. So that's where you have an obvious good piece, obvious bad piece scenario. But what about when it's like a little less obvious? Like what about like on the master level where we try to get rid of a bad piece, but it's less obvious that it's a bad piece? Now, there are situations like this, and they're kind of interesting. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to flip the board real quick, because I want to show you a position from the closed Sicilian. It happens after e4, c5. We're going to have knight f3, d6, d3, and we'll say knight c6. We'll have g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, castle's kingside, knight f6. Now here's like an interesting critical juncture point. There's this move knight on b to d2 and this move knight to c3. And it actually kind of makes a little bit of a difference in terms of what black's plan should be. If knight on b to d2, the move bishop to g4 with the idea of at some point playing bishop takes f3 is a little bit less desirable, because that knight is going to be replaced by this other knight, and the plan of playing c3 and d4, kind of Roy Lopez style, taking over the middle, is still on the table and is very easy for white to pull off. But if knight c3, and then say castle's kingside, we'll say rook e1, this move bishop g4 is actually kind of good. Not only is it kind of good, like just at some point black exchanging for something on this diagonal is probably a great thing for black. And it took me probably the majority of my chess playing career to really understand why. Like I've always kind of known that black seemed to get better results when he played this idea. When black played bishop g4, and even on the grandmaster level, even looking at these really top level games, Kramnik versus Anand, you can just see that it's a little lopsided. Like black is doing a lot better than he really should in this position. He's winning 33% of the games, drawing 56% of the games, doing incredibly well on the grandmaster level. Why is black doing so good by just getting rid of this piece where, objectively the position is still relatively equal? How is this helping black so much? Especially since, you look at these pawns, they're on dark squares, and, these pawns are on light squares. You would think that, okay, well, is this your good bishop, bad bishop? What is it? Well, actually, for starters, the good bishop, bad bishop thing doesn't really quite apply in the same way here, because the pawns are not locked on squares. So we don't have a locked pawn situation the way we would in a French defense. So really, black's good bishop is this one. It's the dark squared bishop that is cutting this huge diagonal. And that means that what black is trying to do is black is trying to eventually attack the dark squares. He's trying to get a huge attack along the dark squares. Now, when you're trying to get a huge attack along the dark squares, it helps if you can get rid of your opponent's pieces that control dark squares. Now, this bishop can only control light squares, but this knight on f3 controls two very important dark squares, and more importantly, it simply can control dark squares. So black would very much like to exchange this bishop for this knight at some point. He would certainly like to get prompted. If he gets prompted, that's great because he doesn't lose any time. You know, bishop f3, and then he's going to follow up with rook b8, and now he wants to play b5, b4, and continue attacking these dark squares. But now black is etching out territory in the dark squares, and now he can start trying to dominate those dark squares, and those dark squares are really going to start kind of coming into their own, and that's going to be a generally good thing for black. And that's something that really just took me years to understand. Like, why is this piece a bad piece? And it's because black's whole plan revolves around attacking this long diagonal, and it revolves around attacking the dark squares. So in essence, getting rid of this piece, we are getting rid of our bad bishop. We're getting rid of the bishop that can't control dark squares. And we're leaving ourselves with pieces that can control dark squares. And more importantly, we're reducing the number of pieces that our opponent has that can defend dark squares by 1. So we're making huge amounts of progress. It also helps that we kind of have a space problem back here, and we would like to be able to connect our rooks so that both rooks can actively go to useful places. And without the bishop in the way, it just makes life a little bit easier to do that. And that falls back on the general rule of when you have a little bit less space, it's usually good to make exchanges, no matter what those exchanges are. But of course, as we saw in the Scotch opening, there are exceptions to that. Okay, so that's pretty much like when to exchange pieces, when not to exchange pieces, the super simple spots where we know that we should be exchanging or not exchanging. And of course, in this last example, the more complex scenarios where we might find an exchange desirable. So anyways, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you learned something new about chess, and I hope you can use some of these ideas in your own games. Thank you very much for watching.